Here in Britain, we love a cup of tea, and I'm no exception. In fact, in the UK, we love it so much, we drink 165 million cups of tea every day. But whether we're switching on the lights, flicking on the kettle, or turning on the TV, we don't really think about how the electricity we're using gets to our homes.
Get this down. Hey, flip-flop!
At 11 AM on Wednesday the 11th of August 1999, millions of people across the UK stopped what they were doing and went outside to stare up at the sky to watch a total solar eclipse pass overhead. This meant a huge drop in the amount of electricity that we were using. And half an hour later, when people went back inside to their homes and offices and factories, the amount of electricity needed shot up again by 3,000 megawatts, in fact. The largest increase we've ever seen in the UK. That's the equivalent of an extra 5 million cups of tea. Today, we're headed to the place responsible for balancing the supply and demand of electricity that we use, the National Grid Control Centre. First off, what is the National Grid?
The National Grid is sort of like the motorway network for electricity in the country. So behind us on the wall you can see a big wiring diagram, and that shows the whole of the electricity motorway network running right from Scotland in the north down to London and the south coast in the south. And that carries nearly all of the electricity you use every day to boil your kettle, to light and heat your home. So from here we are constantly balancing the supply of electricity from generators, matching that against the demand that we see across the country. And that demand varies minute by minute, day by day, in ways that we can forecast, but in ways that do change based on the weather and the time of year and what people are doing.
So how do you balance supply and demand?
The British grid system runs at a frequency of 50 hertz. That means the electricity is always pulsing backwards and forwards, 50 times a second. And that's what puts power into your light, into your cooker, into everything else, that 50 hertz power. Now, what actually happens is that if we have a little bit more generation than demand, a little bit more supply than demand, then it speeds up a bit like you're going down a hill too quickly.
Okay.
And it goes to 50.1 hertz or a little bit more. If we've not got quite enough generation, then the speed slows down, a bit like when you're pedaling uphill on your bike and it's really hard work. And we see it just dip down to 49.9 hertz. It's a tiny little system frequency variation. You wouldn't see it at home, but to us it's all important. And if we get it wrong, then the system frequency will drop a bit, and then we'll have to push a bit more power in to make sure we get it right. And it's a bit like flying a plane into land. You want to trim it a little bit each way just to keep yourself on track. And that's exactly what we're doing here.
And in order to keep flying that plane, the grid draws upon a variety of different energy sources. This model uses the same method we've used for over a century to generate electricity. Water is heated and turns into steam. That steam turns a turbine, which turns a generator to produce the electricity. Coal, gas, biomass and nuclear power plants all use this method, but with different sources to heat the water. Wind turbines, hydroelectric dams and tidal barrages also turn a turbine to generate electricity, but without heating water. And finally, we have solar panels, which use the photovoltaic effect. These methods each have their own advantages and disadvantages, but what percentage of these power sources do we use day to day?
A typical day, about half the power we get these days is from burning gas, from gas-fired power stations, maybe 10 or 15% from nuclear. Most of the rest is coming from renewables or trading with our neighbouring countries through cables under the sea, through interconnectors. And then just a little bit from coal.
We had a few days recently where we didn't use any coal power, is that right?
That's right. For us it's amazingly exciting and one of those major milestones. This summer just gone, we had for the first time in 130 years, we ran the electricity grid without burning any coal. And I think if you look today, there's actually more solar running than there is coal on the grid, even right now. As that coal closes, it's quite a small gap to fill, so we'd expect even more renewables to come on. Of course, we might see additional nuclear, and we expect to see additional nuclear coming on over the coming years. And some of those coal stations have converted from burning coal to burning what we call biomass. And so those power stations will carry on with a new life.
describe for me the flow of electricity from its source to my kettle.
Oh yeah, okay, great question because it's not here, is it? So what happens is that your power will be generated either at a big power station, like at Hinkley Point Nuclear Power Station or one of the other big power stations around the country. One of those on its own can feed a whole city, supply a whole city with power. Or it might be generated at a wind farm, either at a farm down the road or out in the sea somewhere off the coast of Britain, or it could be at some solar panels. That power feeds into the grid, into the big motorway network here, and then it moves around that grid like water to where it's needed. And then it will flow from the motorway network, from the transmission grid here, it flows down into the local distribution grid in a town or city near you, and it flows down to a big grey box at the end of your street, and from that grey box it flows out on a single wire which feeds every single house individually on the street, under the road, up into the middle of your house probably to a fuse box, and then from that fuse box it goes out into a little ring which is in the wall all the way around the house, all the way around to the kettle socket, probably halfway up the wall in your kitchen, and then out of that into the kettle. And obviously it only goes into the kettle when it's turned on.
So we know how National Grid manages electricity, but what happens when a large group of people cause a simultaneous surge in electricity demand after watching an eclipse or making a cup of tea after their favourite TV show?
We see a huge surge for power just at the end of those TV programmes, just as the adverts come on. We know that's happening. We've got a TV in here that we will watch as well, and we look at how exciting and interesting the TV programme is going to be. And if we know that loads of people are going to sit down and watch it, we'll get extra power ready so that at the end of the programme we can push it all in and just match off against demand. If we didn't do it, the system frequency would fall.
So you've got that energy on standby. Is that stored somewhere, or are you switching somewhere on? How do you communicate with power stations to say what you need?
What we'll do is we'll warn people that we might want to use them, and some of the power stations we can get them ready so that they're ready to go in seconds. And a big good example of that is the pumped storage stations. So pumped storage power is where you have a big lake at the top of a mountain and a big lake at the bottom, almost like a bath. You can empty the top lake down a tube through an electricity generator and then into the bottom lake. And we have several really large pumped storage stations around the country. And then just as the TV program finishes, you pull the plug at the top lake, all the water comes rushing down the hill, hits the turbines, and we get huge bursts of electrical power in 10, 15, 20 seconds. And then that surges into the grid and helps meet that big pickup in demand. And the great thing we have is that electricity pretty much travels as fast as you can imagine, almost at the speed of light. So it can go from one power station, it spreads all around the country in an instant, as fast as you can think.
The electricity available at our fingertips is instantaneous and seemingly infinite. But perhaps the next time you make a cup of tea, have a think about the dynamic but unseen system of technology and people behind that power, and the thousands of others simultaneously making their own hot cup of tea. Thank you to everyone who helped make this video possible. If you liked it, please share, subscribe, and check out our previous videos. Thanks for watching. This feels like the lamest episode of Top Gear. We want to try out this little Citroen. So we're going to take it to the National Grid.